Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to present the results of this PCV study. It's a three-arm randomized study aiming at identifying the effect of mass vaccination campaigns using a fractional dose of anti-pneumococcal vaccine to accelerate herd protection for pneumococci in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, we know that vaccination campaigns targeting children up to 5 years of age reduce vaccine-type carriage and invasive pneumococcal disease. In a context of humanitarian crisis or a high prevalence of malnutrition or low vaccination coverage, we can expect VT carriage to be very high and extended to greater age groups. So even a strategy that used the cheapest vaccine might be very costly to implement and hard to sustain in time and would be restricted to urgent needs. So the fractional dose approach can be a good alternative. Now, for the needs of this study, we used Pneumosil, as Alain said, which is right now, it's a PCV10, and it's the cheapest PCV, the most affordable WHO pre-qualified PCV right now. Now, about the background in Niger, it's a sub-Saharan Africa, which has introduced a PCV13, that's the one from Pfizer, in their vaccination program in 2014. And the schedule was 3 doses starting at 6 weeks of age and then every 4 weeks. There is no catch-up campaign. And when we looked at the Maradi area, we looked at the estimated vaccine coverage in 2019. It was estimated to be at 48%. And just also, the price of this vaccine is $3 per dose, which is paid for by Gavi right now for this country. And for this study, the objective was to evaluate the superiority of a full-dose campaign targeting 1 to 9-year-olds at VT carriage reduction 6 months post-campaign compared to control. And then to evaluate if one fractional dose, one-fifth fractional dose campaign was actually had a non-inferior impact than the full dose. We used 1/5 of the dose because of previous immunogenicity data that we had, and also for logistics and practical reasons. We randomized 63 clusters in a 3:1 ratio with 27 clusters in the full-dose arm, 27 in the fractional dose, and 9 in the control arm. The clusters are made up of one village or a group of villages which are close to one another, who share a marketplace or a school, for example, and limited to a population of between 500 and 4,000 people. We first did the basic or the baseline survey, for which we took samples, nose and throat samples, and then 6 months later we started the vaccination campaign that ran for a period of 2 months. That was June, July, and August, and then 6 months later we conducted the follow-up study. And you have to see that for those two tests, we selected 36 households at random in each cluster based on the census list. You have to realize that the two surveys were sampled independently. In each household, the investigators had to first fill a questionnaire, and then they took a nasopharyngeal swab, which was then directly placed in a culture box, and then in a cool box. And the samples were taken to Maradi, where they were kept at -80 degrees C before being sent to Kirishi in Kenya for lab analysis. And for the calculation of the size of samples, we considered a baseline VT prevalence of 30% with a 50% reduction post-campaign in the full dose arm. So that's for the superiority. And then we considered a 7.5% non-inferiority margin between the full dose arm and the fractional dose arm. And I would now like to tell you to show you the results with a quick description of the participants. First of all, you see an even distribution of the age groups in the different arms of the study. In terms of coverage with PCV13, it's the first study. So and the PCV13 in 13 in EPI, we had about 40% of the children in each group who had received 3 doses mentioned in their health passport. And about 40% actually had received 3 doses according to the parents' report, but it was not mentioned in their health passport. So we have to mention here that the vaccine coverage of the youngest age group, from 1 to 2 years of age, moved up to 70%, which is actually higher than planned, because at first we thought that there should be a 50% of vaccine coverage with 30% prevalence in our assumptions for the calculation of the sample size. And then, in the second survey, we also saw that the distribution of age groups in the different arms of the campaign was almost the same, and the vaccine coverage this time went up to 50%, as indicated in the health passport, which is a little bit higher than in the baseline survey. So now, compared to our PCV10 campaign, the coverage with the card was 70 and 75% in the 70 and 75% respectively in the full dose and fractional dose arms, and 21 and 16% in the full dose and fractional dose by report. The people who report having received the vaccine, but without evidence provided by the card. So we come to the main results. As you can see at the beginning, we have had a carriage prevalence of any pneumococcus of 16, 18%, 15, 16, and 18% in the full dose and fractional dose and control arm.
After the immunization campaign in the control arm, we noted a lesser difference. A lesser difference between the two campaign rounds. It remained at 18.8% and 16.5% respectively. As to the other arms, the fractional dose, we saw a reduction between 18 to 8%, and similarly in the full arm, full dose arm, a reduction of 16 to 5%, a drop from 15 to 5%.
Nous avons mené les différentes comparaisons. Donc, dans la
So we made our comparisons
entre full dose
between full dose
campagne de vaccination
and
de masse, donc
without any mass
nous avons observé
campaign,
plus faible prévalence
the control arm, and we noted a lower prevalence of carriage of pneumococcus in the full dose arm rather than the control.
des campagnes avec dose complète par rapport
And it shows the superiority of a campaign with the full dose compared with no vaccination campaign. And when we compare the full dose and the fractional dose, the lower limit of the confidence interval of the risk difference, risk ratio, 5.10%, is higher than the margin of non-inferiority, which is at minus 5.7%, which allows us to demonstrate the non-inferiority of a campaign with fractional dose compared with a full dose campaign. And finally, these mass campaigns worked very well. We demonstrated the non-inferiority of a vaccination campaign with a fractional dose versus the full dose. Such strategies might be useful to speed up the achievement of herd immunity in a context where you have a high risk of pneumococcus diseases or low vaccination coverage, also in tough humanitarian crisis situations where there is a high need of vaccines, while the supply of vaccines might be limited by import-related difficulties. And I'd like to end my presentation by thanking all the participants in the study, the individuals and institutions without whom this work would not have been possible. Thank you for your attention.